It's the Hero Show. Welcome to the Hero Show, everybody. Starring the irrepressible Andrew Bernstein and the rugged Robert Begley. So I am Andrew Bernstein. You are indubitably Robert Begley. How you doing this afternoon, Robert?
I'm doing great, Andy. Ready to shoot for the stars in today's episode.
Shoot for the stars with a kid from Brooklyn, right?
That's
Carl
right,
Sagan.
Benson Hoist. Two kids from Brooklyn, you and him.
Yeah, and a kid from the Bronx. We're go-
That's right.
well, I think Elon Musk is from South Africa originally, but he says we're going to be on Mars within 30 years, and I think Carl Sagan would certainly be very supportive of that, that endeavor.
Yes, yes, he would. He would.
Yeah, I mean, before we get into Carl Sagan's biography and everything, I think he's very famous for Cosmos, right? The TV series and then subsequently the book. And if
Yeah,
anybody hasn't seen the TV series, but one of the great things about YouTube, Robert, is like everything's available on YouTube. I've been rewatching the Cosmos series on YouTube
me too.
recently. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's superb. The book is really good. You can get it inexpensively from Amazon. But this is, I mean, Carl Sagan's accomplished many things, but the Cosmos series is a great popularizer of science, bringing science to the intelligent layman. And it's just brilliant. It's just brilliantly done.
Yes, I agree, Andy. I watched it as a kid when it first aired, and wasn't. I was kind of like Rocket Man, and all the science I don't understand. It's just my job 5 days a week. That's kind of like but he brought me into that universe, the way he phrased it. And cosmos is order in the universe. That's why he named it that. He was looking for order in the universe. So we'll definitely dig in to that as part of I think that's his crowning achievement, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he integrated so much. I don't want to, he's a astronomer and astrophysicist, but he's got chapters in there, on biology, on the origins of life that I think
Yep.
I'm not a biologist, but makes sense to me. What he's saying. He was a broad-based scientist, not narrowly focused, which is very popular in the academy today, and that's I think one of the reasons why he was denied tenure at Harvard. But you know, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So born in Brooklyn, 1934, right? Uh, there, there he is, a little
Yes.
older than in 1934, uh, and and grows up in Brooklyn. I think, but I think the family moves to New Jersey later on when he goes to high school. Is that
Broadway
is that right?
High
Yeah,
School.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, right. And
So let's just
yeah,
stick,
let's start.
Angie,
Yeah, go ahead.
before he leaves Brooklyn. Picture yourself, you're 5 years old. Your mother gives you a library card. You go to the library and you say, I want a book on the stars. And she comes there and hands you a book that has Clark Gable and Jean Harlow and Alan Ladd. And she's like, and he's like, no, 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 those stars. And then he finds out that the
Clark
sun
Gable's a
is
pretty good star, huh? I
a
like
big
Clark Gable,
star.
but yeah,
It wanted
but
to play
that's
Howard
not.
Rourke
Yeah,
in the movie, The
yeah,
Fountainhead. But
and
anyway,
would have been really good too. Would have been really good, but that's not
yeah.
the stars that Carl Sagan was referring to.
No, he realizes, he learns the sun is a star and it's just closer than all the other ones, and his life has changed. He goes to, in New York City, they have the World's Fair. He's fascinated with that. And then as a kid, I don't know if you did this, but I did. Did you ever go to the Museum of Natural History as a kid and
Yeah.
and
Oh
like
yeah.
class
Oh,
trips?
definitely.
The
Yeah.
dinosaurs and the whales, the scale of that. So Sagan is eating
Yeah.
all this stuff
And the
up as
Hayden
a
and
kid.
the Hayden Planetarium too. The Star Show at the
That's
Hayden
right.
Planetarium. Yeah.
That's right.
But
Changed him forever and wanted him to be an astronomer. He didn't know what the term was, but at 5, 6, 7 years old, his life was, his life course was like already plotted, because that's what amazed him, and he was good at it. And so, right, the family moves from Brooklyn to Rahway, New Jersey, where he goes to high school. He's a brilliant student there, then goes to college, and then realizes people get paid to be astronomers. And he's like, wow, I would do this for free. And they're actually going to pay me. And just goes
I got
on
I
and
got
on. One,
yeah.
Go ahead,
Right. Yeah.
Andy.
Now
Yeah.
I have to interject one thing here. Uh, you know, the I, I'm a just a personal note here. I'm an inveterate humanities guy, and I was never good enough in math to do the math required, by the sciences. If I was going to be a scientist, the one field in science that really fascinated me was astronomy. And just the study of the stars and the cosmos, just the vastness
Yes.
of it, the grand scale, the grand scale nature of it. It's just absolutely fascinating. And Carl Sagan obviously could do the math that I couldn't do. But
Yeah.
he got a PhD in astronomy and astrophysics from the University of Chicago when he was 26. I mean, that's that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite an achievement in and of itself. But I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So you
No,
were
so he
talking
just
about
goes one thing after another, and yeah, gets his PhD, and then I think he did some research on Venus, right on the surface
yes,
of Venus, and that was, I think,
yeah,
his
yeah.
first thing that actually put him, wow, this guy is different from people who preceded him, and
Yeah, it's like
he,
1960 when he's like 26 years old. He writes a famous paper on the atmosphere and greenhouse. And I think Carl Sagan was one of the first, maybe the first, to realize how bleeping hot it is on Phoenix. 900 degrees Fahrenheit. You and Carrie might like it there.
I lie, yeah, it's like what I want a condo there.
Yeah, 900 degrees. Yeah, yeah. But I think it's like 500 degrees Celsius, 900 degrees Fahrenheit, and
Yeah.
he was one of the first to analyze the effect of the greenhouse effect on on the atmosphere and the surface of Venus. Yeah, I think that put him. I'm pretty sure that put him on the scientific map when he was still a kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, big step forward for him and for our knowledge
Hmm.
of Venus.
Right.
And
Right. Go
and he
ahead.
went on to teach at Harvard for a while. I think
Started
that
at
was his first
Harvard.
full time teaching
That's
gig in the late
right.
'60s, and
That's
he
right.
was denied.
But
Go ahead.
he's, as you're going to say, he was denied tenure because now he was getting popular acclaim. And that was one of the things that they looked down, because what you and I, Andy, consider one of his greatest virtues is bringing science to the intelligent layman. He's on Johnny Carson's show.
Right,
He
right.
is like too popular for his peers to grant him tenure at Harvard. At least that was one of the reasons. There might have been some other ones, but I'm pretty sure that was one of the main reasons, is that they just thought he was too popular. And but not, I think from my perspective, Johnny Carson doesn't have that many scientists or astronomers on his show, and that's a different audience than than the
Yeah,
professionals in the field.
yeah. Johnny Carson. And I think even though the youngest members of our audience probably know who Johnny Carson was, he was like the king of late night TV, and he really was very very
Yes,
funny guy, very classy guy, uh, and very very popular. And he had Carl Sagan on his show, I think 20 some odd times. I mean,
a lot.
over the years. Yeah, he was on a lot, and Carl Sagan regarded Johnny Carson's vast audience as just a giant classroom or a vast
Yeah,
classroom, because he was so passionate about popularizing science and bringing it to the intelligent layman. He was expert at it. And yeah, you got to question. I know some of his peers at Harvard said they thought that he was using borrowing the ideas of others, and for little more than self promotion. But I don't know that that's a fair criticism, Robert. I mean, Carl Sagan, like he said, always tried to attribute the genesis of ideas to their proper originator. And
yes,
he was explaining science to the intelligent layman. I got to think there's a little bit of envy, at work there, that this brash young guy is a big superstar, and
yeah,
some professional jealousy, I'm guessing. But I also know another, because I mentioned it before, and I want to mention it again. It's one of many problems in the academy today. The modern mentality, distinct from the Renaissance man or the ancients, was to narrowly focus on one specialty. So like you specialize on the atmosphere of Venus, and that's your specialty. You become like a world class expert on this, and that's how you teach. That's how you get tenure at Harvard. Whereas Carl Sagan was much broader based than that. The atmosphere of Venus and the dust storms on Mars and the surface and atmosphere of Jupiter. He wrote on all these different things on the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. He was a Renaissance man in the field, and that also doesn't fly typically in the universities. And it's unfortunate because what Carl Sagan's doing is integration. He's
Yes.
doing this on the vast scale. Yeah, I mean, there's value in focus on one narrow area, but to see the big picture is enormously valuable. I think that's another reason why he was denied tenure at Harvard, and it's unfortunate. But it didn't hinder his career. I mean, he went on to great things.
Yeah, he went on to great things, and Ithaca, right? Ithaca College in middle of the state of New York is where he eventually settled in, and they liked that recognition. They liked it kind of put them on the map as a college.
Yeah. I don't
While
think it
he's
was Ithaca. It
becoming
was
more.
it was it was Cornell, wasn't it? It was Cornell University, I think,
Oh,
where
first
where it
Cornell.
was. Yeah. No, he
First
was he
Cornell.
was at
But
Cornell. He was at Cornell for
okay,
many years. Another,
okay,
another
okay.
Ivy League. I mean,
Yes.
he's a superstar. He's not going to be at some little college somewhere. No, he was at he was
I'm
at
jump
another,
starting. Yeah.
yeah, another Ivy League college. Cornell University, and yeah, you're right. They had a much more rational attitude, I think, towards Sagan's broad-based interest and his growing fame and popularity. They welcomed it, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. So he moves again. He starts publishing. He starts getting more recognition, and uh, I don't know, because Cosmos is such a big part of his life, Andy. I'm ready to jump in on that. If there's
Yeah.
anything you
Oh
want
no,
to cover
let's
before
let's do
then.
Cosmos. No, let's do Cosmos. He
Yeah.
was at Cornell University, Ithaca, New York, like you said, and Cosmos. The original TV series was 1980, I think. I
Yes.
think that was the year.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, by the
Hmm.
way. Just as an aside, talking about integrating, I think that was the year that Milton Friedman did Free to Choose. On public broadcasting.
I'm
Those
almost certain. Yeah, I'm almost certain. Right, that was a good era for PBS. Let's put it.
yeah,
Let's
yeah,
put it that way.
yeah,
And
yeah. Milton
500
Friedman.
million people. Right.
Right, right. Well, as I said, Milton Friedman, Nobel laureate in economics by that time. Again, who had accomplished sophisticated advances in the field of economics, turned to popularizing and showing how capitalism creates wealth. Free to Choose, very very good series for the intelligent layman. Carl Sagan showing explaining the vastness of the cosmos. You're right. If that was right in the same year, 79, 80, right in that era. It's a good year for PBS. I'd like to see them replicate that, again today, 40 years later. But
Yeah.
yeah, Cosmos. So yeah, that would be great. But yeah, let's jump into Cosmos. Go ahead.
So yeah, he has it's 13 episodes, as you said, Andy. They cover different aspects of astronomy, different sciences, but how they all integrate into each other, and the physical demonstrations that he does. We talked about this earlier. One of the great things is he'll take an abstract concept and show you perceptually what it's like. So he has this huge timeline, this huge grid of timeline with all these squares, and only in one corner is the present, where man is, and he equates it to being like 10:30, 11 p.m. on December 31st, if we look at the calendar year. So it's this one little block out of, hundreds, thousands of these squares. And that's a way to again bring something to the intelligent layman that could be just so abstract. I mean, and
Right.
billions. When they name a unit of measurement after you, you've you've hit it, right. The Sagan
A
is
Sagan.
something like 4 billion, 2 + 2 billion, and
Right.
Johnny Carson
Right
would
from
make fun,
his.
right? Billions and billions.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Because Carl Sagan said billions and billions of planets out there. He's talking about,
Yeah.
what are the odds that some of them are populated with living beings, and
Yes.
and that some of those are intelligent beings. Billions
Yeah.
upon billions, I think, is what
That's
was
right.
the
That's
phrase
right.
that he
Hmm.
used. But he's talking about, because the universe is, according to contemporary science, the universe is roughly 14 billion years old, or 13.8 billion years old. And Carl Sagan, you're right, he had this great way to visualize it. He but by analogy to a calendar year. And when you get to life on Earth, it's like approaching, late December, and by the time man evolves, it's like you say, like an hour from midnight on December 31st. So we are very, very, very young, in the overall scheme of things. And it reminded me of
Yeah.
Ayn Rand's great insight, which she said, "quote It's earlier than anybody thinks," unquote.
Yes.
Which is also,
Yes.
but you're right. It's a great way to visualize the history of the universe. And Carl Sagan was
Hmm.
just brilliant in devising methods to teach science to the intelligent layman. I think that's why he's so beloved. So, but yeah,
Yeah. So, Andy,
Cosmos. Yeah, go ahead.
can we just clarify now? So, philosophically, because here's one of the conflicts between physics or astronomers and philosophers. So, you and I know the universe is eternal, and Sagan is not always perfectly consistent in his definitions. And here, we think what he's referring to is after the Big Bang happened,
Right.
and things ended up the way they are now. That's happened 15 billion years ago, however long ago. But we know that the universe is the sum total of everything that exists. So something had to exist to do the banging, and that was part of the universe. So it's eternal. It's out of time. I just want to
Right.
clarify that, because that's not always clearly done, and he does not do that in the 13-part series. So we want to just
Yeah.
uh, bring up some points when we can.
Yeah, there's the distinction, obviously, between science and philosophy. And as a philosopher, I can't say what the age is of the universe's present configuration. Uh, and so, Sagan, a number of scientists say 13.8 billion, or roughly 14 billion years ago. So, I mean, I can't say whether there was a Big Bang or not. There's no philosophical way to analyze that. Just go by what the
Mhm.
scientists who do the empirical research, tell us. So, but if that's true, you could put it hypothetically. I remember telling D'Souza this when we had the debate about Christianity. If that's true, and there was this Big Bang, this cosmic explosion, 14 billion years ago. One thing we could say in logic is that if there's an explosion, something has to exist antecedently in order to explode. Nothing does
Yes.
not explode. Nothing doesn't do anything because it doesn't exist. And
Right.
so, it's really appalling, Robert, that there are these brilliant scientists who do this great research in the empirical sciences, and yet I've seen some of them say, well, the Big Bang was a creation theory. It was ex nihilo. It was from nothing. I just go, what? That's no, that's not logically possible. And so, if the universe is eternal, always was, always will be, may change its forms, but cannot come into existence, cannot go out of existence. That's pure. We can say that based purely in logic. So I think if the Big Bang theory is accurate, I have no reason to doubt it. I'm not a scientist. I have no reason to doubt it. I can put it hypothetically. If it's accurate, it accounts for the present configuration of the universe, not for a creation of the universe. The Big Bang, rationally understood, has to be understood as an eternal universe theory. Something existed, eternally. It exploded, and that accounts for why the galaxies are moving away from each other at such high rates of speed. But yeah,
Mhm.
Rationally, I think we have to interpret the Big Bang Theory. I can say this just as a point in logic, that rationally we have to interpret the Big Bang Theory as a version of an eternal universe. Theory. So yeah, it's very simple, right? Kid from Brooklyn and the Bronx can grok this. If I can use Heinlein's term, to have an
Yes.
explosion has to be
Yes.
something that exploded. You know,
Yeah.
you throw a lighted match into nothing, you won't get an explosion. But you throw a lighted match into a barrel of gasoline, you'll look out. You'll get an explosion, right? That's the way. That's
Yeah.
the way I get. That's the way I think.
Yeah. Just wrapping this up, Andy, because we might come to it again. Ayn Rand's Brilliance in Atlas Shrugged is showing the top three students what do they major in: philosophy, physics, and philosophy, because they know the blending, the integration there is essential. And as Leonard Peikoff says, philosophy trumps physics in the sense of the eternal truths or the eternality of the universe there. So I see a smidgen of Sagan having that dichotomy. But again, let's come back to his achievements here. And this is
Yeah.
the series is just fabulous. And right, that's one example. December 31st, we're into the the end of the present state of where we are. And if one thing, so we haven't yet mentioned this, but one of my favorite scenes in the Cosmos is the distinction. There's one episode he's in New York City and he has two newspapers, New York Post and New York Daily News. And he despised astrology, right? And
Right.
could not get the popularity of it. So he has two newspapers and they both the same exact day he reads them, and they're vague. First of all, they're vague, so they could pretty much fit anyone. But they're different enough
Right.
that he's like, look, it's just wrong right here in on the surface of it. And Sagan, as a scientist, and inquiry and respect for reason and the scientific method, that's the driving force. And then the flip side is convincing, persuading people that no, astrology is bunk, and you could do it for entertainment purposes, but it's not a legitimate science. And that's one of my favorite scenes in the series as well.
Yeah, Sagan, a true scientist, committed to the rational method. And one of my favorite quotes from Sagan, I've heard this several times. I think it's true. It might be apocryphal, I guess, but I think it's true. Sounds like it, because he was, as we'll discuss, he was very committed to SETI, right? The search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Yes.
That was a
Yes.
major passion of his, a major plank of his many achievements. So emotionally, he's very invested in this. He loves it, and I think some journalists asked him, Dr. Sagan, tell me, gut feeling, is there intelligent life in outer space? And Sagan responded, I don't think with my gut. Oh,
That's
yes.
fabulous.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yes. I don't think with my gut. Every semester, Robert, I tell that to my logic students.
Hmm.
Our gut feelings or emotions are really important in our lives. We want to be happy and joyous and everything. And our emotions are really important, but our emotions won't tell us what's true out here in the world. That requires
Yeah.
rational thinking. That's a brilliant, example of it from one of
Yes.
the great scientists of our era.
Hmm. They won't put food on the table either. And he knows that. Sagan knows that. So his respect for the scientific method. And again, this is how he used that forum, that platform, first with Johnny Carson, then with PBS, to tell this story. And with Cosmos, again, I thought that was one good dramatization. I know you have a piece you're going to read, you want to read, Andy, but one other thing.
Yeah.
So we talk about religion too, the impact, the negative impact of religion. One of the episodes, I think it's on travel, and excuse me, he mentions Bruno Giordano and then Galileo, who are persecuted and once condemned to death because of their inquisitiveness, and they're going against the doctrine of the church. And the contrast is he goes to the Netherlands, where free thought, which is where John Locke went and Rene Descartes. And this one man, I don't think I heard of him outside of the program, Christian Huygens, but he says the Dutch welcomed those ideas. They were free thinkers, and Sagan is glorifying them in this episode, saying, "Sorry, Italy, yeah, you had a renaissance, but there was a big clash, and you chose to thwart any kind of scientific inquiry, while the Netherlands, which became the best country on the planet for a short period, when they had all the artists, and they were traveling to China, trading with China. They were all about free thought and free trade." And Sagan
Settled New
dramatizes
York,
that, explains
settled New York, settled
New
New York
Amsterdam. Yeah,
originally, right?
exactly. Yeah,
17th
made
century.
New Amsterdam, and all the things that, so many benefits came from that era, what's called the Golden Dutch Age. And I just love the way he's showing that we have mysticism and superstition running the show. And even later on, he talks about that. He talks about Alexandria and the ancient Greeks. And imagine if there was no book burning, and imagine if the scientists were allowed to continue. We would not have needed a Leonardo, because there would have been like 5 of them preceding him. Leonardo is one of a kind. That might be an exaggeration, but the fact is, free inquiry, free thought, and free trade, you and I can add, all of those things allow for humans to progress forward, and that's something that Sagan advocated.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's striking, what you're talking about here, Robin, and what Sagan was talking about, because after the Inquisition suppressed Galileo, 1633, I think it was 1630s.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the Catholic Church is suppressing the scientific advance at that point, and burned Bruno at the stake, and and many others, and a number of intellectual historians have pointed out, like you're saying, that the centers of scientific research in Europe moved northwards into the Protestant countries, the Netherlands, and eventually, of course, preeminently Great Britain and Great Britain's North American colonies, the United States. But it's an interesting tension, I just want to say briefly, in the Protestant tradition, because on the one hand, Luther, Calvin, the various Protestant founders were fanatics, and they burned people at the stake right and left, just that way the Catholic Church did, burn infidels, heretics. But at the same time, the Protestant tradition had a much more individualistic strain to it than Catholicism does. The Protestants, like to say things like, I establish a personal faith relationship between my soul and Jesus Christ, which is faith based, but it's very individualistic. It's my soul and God. And so I don't have to go through, Holy Mother Church. I don't have to go through the organization in order to be saved. If you do that in the Catholic Church, you're going to give that organization a lot of power over you. The Protestants are much more individualistic, which is not an accident in the what Sagan's point out, in the Netherlands, and especially shortly later, Great Britain, and then the soon-to-be United States became the Protestant countries. It's not an accident. Became the world centers of scientific research.
And actually, Andy, you said this last week. Churchill preferred the Protestants because they were nearer to reason. That's right. That's just one example there. But
it's interesting, because the Protestants, more than anybody, stress faith. Faith and faith alone justifies mankind, said Martin Luther. But that individualistic element, my soul and God, that actually liberates the more rational members of that faith to question dogma and to question authority, which you can't do when you have to conform to what the organization, as one example, the Catholic Church. When you have to be an organization man. You have to, you just simply have to comply. And the Protestants kind of broke us apart, that power of God's earthly agency. It became much more individualistic.
The monopoly,
liberated.
Basically,
the monopoly. The monopoly, and they liberated the best thinkers amongst the Protestant, the Protestant religion. So Sagan's certainly right about that. There's a lengthy quote here I want to read. It's long, but I think it's It's a couple of pages, but I think
Go
I
for
think
it.
it's worthwhile. Thank you, because he's talking about. First of all, I didn't even know that. But he points out, this is on page 37. This is the chapter, chapter 2 of Cosmos. Episode 2 in the TV series, which you can find on YouTube. One voice in the cosmic fugue, talking about life on Earth and the possibility that there could be living beings and intelligent beings on other planets. I didn't know. He's talking about organic matter that is found in interstellar space, amino acids found in meteorites, and he says, quote on page 38, the molecules of life fill the cosmos. So let me continue from there, because we're all fascinated by the idea: is there life on other planets, and of course, is there
Yeah.
intelligent life on other planets, and of course, is there advanced life on other, much more advanced than we are? And by the way, we should point out, Robert, Carl Sagan wrote a famous science fiction novel, right? Contact.
We'll get to that.
19.
We'll get to
Okay,
that.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay,
Yes.
great.
At the
And
at the
and
end.
and
Yes.
and the film, right?
And the film.
Okay,
Yeah. Mhm.
all right. But even if life on another planet has the same molecular chemistry as life here, there is no reason to expect it to resemble familiar organisms. Well, that's interesting. Consider the enormous diversity of living things on Earth, all of which share the same planet and an identical molecular biology. Those other beasts and vegetables are probably radically different from any organism we know here. There may be some convergent evolution because there may be only one best solution to a certain environmental problem, something like two eyes, for example, for binocular vision at optical frequencies. But in general, the random character of the evolutionary process should create extraterrestrial creatures very different from any that we know. So, I don't want to read a lot of this, but he's talking about research that he and one of his Cornell colleagues, Salpeter, have made some calculations. Talking about possible life on Jupiter. One way to make where is it? Well, he's talking about a giant gas planet like Jupiter. One way to make a living, he puts it, one way to make a living under these conditions is to reproduce before you are fried. Because evidently it's very hot at the surface. Before you are fried, and hope that convection will carry some of your offspring to the higher and cooler layers of the atmosphere. Such organisms could be very little. We call them sinkers. But you could also be a floater, some vast hydrogen balloon pumping helium and heavier gases out of its interior and leaving only the lightest gas, hydrogen, or a hot air balloon staying buoyant by keeping your interior warm using energy acquired from the food you eat. Like familiar terrestrial balloons, the deeper a floater is carried, the stronger is the buoyant force, returning it to the higher, cooler, safer regions of the atmosphere. A floater might eat preformed organic molecules or make its own from sunlight and air, somewhat as plants do on Earth. Up to a point, the bigger a floater is, the more efficient it will be. Salpeter and I imagine floaters kilometers across, enormously larger than the greatest whale that ever was, beings the size of cities. A couple more paragraphs. The floaters may propel themselves through the planetary atmosphere with gusts of gas, like a ramjet or a rocket. We imagine them arranged in great lazy herds for as far as the eye can see, with patterns on their skin and adaptive camouflage implying that they have problems too. Because there is at least one other ecological niche in such an environment: hunting. Hunters are fast and maneuverable. They eat the floaters, both for their organic molecules and for their store of pure hydrogen. Hollow sinkers could have evolved into the first floaters, and self propelled floaters into the first hunters. There cannot be very many hunters because if they consume all the floaters, the hunters themselves will perish. Physics and chemistry permit such life forms. Art endows them with a certain charm. Nature, however, is not obligated to follow our speculations. But if there are billions, there's billions upon billions, but if there are billions of inhabited worlds in the Milky Way galaxy, perhaps there will be a few populated by the sinkers, floaters, and hunters, which our imaginations, tempered by the laws of physics and chemistry, have generated. Biology is more like history than it is like physics. You have to know the past to understand the present, and you have to know it in exquisite detail. He concludes it here. We have heard so far the voice of life on one small world only, but we have at last begun to listen for other voices in the cosmic feud.
Great.
And it's just, wow, I just,
Yeah, that's
I
fabulous,
can just
Sandy. Yeah,
imagine, the floaters across the higher, regions of Jupiter's atmosphere, as big as cities, having to try and get away from the hunters, who eat them. Life.
yeah,
It's who knows? Sagan is right. Who knows what we'll find, out there in when we go on Star Trek, the final frontier, your space, the final frontier. Who knows what
yeah.
we'll find out there.
And
Should we talk
and
about SETI? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. Actually, we should. But here's where one of the things about Sagan is that's interesting that I find interesting is he has both the heroic and then kind of a tragic view of human nature of man, because here he thinks we're capable of going out there and finding and that we can do this, but then he flips also to the other side of seeing all the bad we've done, and some of that bad is actually bad, and then some of it he mistakenly considers bad. So uh, that's one of the things that's why I'm somewhat mixed about how much I admire the guy, because there's so much. And yeah, let's move on to that. But I just wanted to get that little bit in there, like just his view of human. That's you could tell a lot about somebody by asking what is their view of man. Is man heroic? Is he tragic? Is he mixed? And Sagan has some of each of those in there.
Right, right. And he's a scientist, great scientist, not a philosopher. Uh,
Yeah,
and the philosophers in our day, for the most part, are pretty bad. And as scientists, just like philosophers rely upon scientists to explain the mechanisms and the workings of nature. So scientists often rely on various philosophers for their moral view and their philosophic theory of human nature. His before we get to SETI, his part of the heroic side that you mentioned, Rob. It's a great quote from Carl Sagan. Uh, actually, there's several. One of them is everybody who's read Ayn Rand's going to resonate with this quote. Our passion for learning is our tool of survival.
yeah,
I mean that
yeah.
Hugh Axton might have said that,
Yes. Yeah.
in Atlas
Yep.
Shrugged. And here's something
Mhm.
that I think is really appropriate for our day. Quote: "The cure for a fallacious argument is a better argument, not the suppression of ideas." Unquote.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's a plea for freedom of speech and freedom of intellectual expression.
Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. I have a couple
Yeah,
more since we're on. He has so many, but extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. All right. So yeah, you make this wild claim, prove it. Give
back
me.
it up.
Are you just talking? Yeah, exactly. Because I'm not going to believe it just because you say so. I'm not going to believe it. And then tying in my point earlier is exploration is in our nature. So that makes me
Yeah,
smile. That definitely
yeah.
makes me think, yeah, this guy is on the right track in this. But yeah, let's move on to the
The
settings,
Se-
because
the
yeah, that's
SETI.
fascinating.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. SETI's fascinating. It's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and Sagan was part of. I was in the Voyage program, where
Yes.
he was part of the scientists who designed these plaques with some kind of universal message that intelligent beings out there, if there are, and if they find it, could understand. The message
Yeah.
from Earth. it was searching for the intelligent beings out there. And Robert, they say be careful what you look for, what you wish for. I always hoped that we find the American aliens, not the German aliens. When we're
Yeah, I'll second that one, Andy.
Yes. And I don't want to sound like a racist here. I mean, German culture has suffered from militarism historically, and of course, National Socialism in the 20th century. But at the same time, German culture has made a lot of advances. But it's the militaristic, element of German culture that we don't want. We don't want to find the Klingons. We don't want to find the Klingons. If everybody's familiar,
They've had the worst philosophers too. If you're staying on that line, just stay with militaristic. The worst philosophers, probably led to those things.
Yeah, Kant, Hegel,
Marx.
Kant, Hegel, and Marx. Yeah, I think of as the unholy triumvirate. But so the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, and Sagan was a trustee at the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence Institute, and this was a major, it's a passion of his, and I can understand why. I mean, you look at the night sky, and like Sagan said, there's billions upon billions, of stars out there. Many of them have planets, revolving around the stars. Our sun is a star, right? The name Sol, hence solar system. And God, you think that billions upon billions, you're certainly right. Just in the Milky Way galaxy alone, never mind, in the other galaxies, there's got to be life, and there's got to be some of that must have evolved into intelligent life. Presumably, I think my limited knowledge of astronomy, we're on the outer edge of the Milky Way galaxy. In the interior of the galaxy, if I remember my astronomy correctly, is older, and consequently, if there's intelligent life forms, they may well be more advanced than we are. And so you can see it's an absolutely fascinating endeavor. But as in many sci-fi stories like Independence Day, they may be bad guys. They may be the Nazi version of the Klingons in the Star Trek series. They may be more advanced than us, and they may be very aggressive, which of course is dangerous. But we're explorers, like Sagan said. We want to go. Our heroic spirit. We want to venture out into space, the final frontier. Right, that great tagline from Star Trek, and we do. Hopefully, go. We come in peace, as when the Americans landed on the moon. We come in peace, and hopefully, the intelligent life forms we meet out there are also peaceful.
Yeah, and Andy, that goes back actually to the World's Fair. He's 5 years old, and one of the things that gets to him is when he sees this little not time machine, but what is it, where you put all these things from the current
time capsule
era.
The time capsule.
Thank you, time capsule, and he never forgot that. So that's the motivation for having these plaques and as part of the search. One interesting thing he says in Johnny Carson, and highly recommend you watch some of his appearances there because they're entertaining, and Carson
and they're available on YouTube also.
On YouTube as well. Yeah. So one of them, Star Wars had just come out, and Sagan, as the scientist, is seeing everything that's wrong with it, and at one point he tells Johnny Carson, it's sure it's entertaining, but they could have hired one or two unemployed scientists to just get that part right. It's like to not get it so wrong, but I have a couple more.
Just let me interject something. Unfortunately, George Lucas was more influenced by Joseph Campbell than he was by Carl Sagan. And if you ever tried to read Joseph Campbell's books, the heroes, what was it, the hero's journey or
Hero's Journey? I like Joseph Campbell, actually. I like him, but
is that right? You're a better man than I am. I couldn't get through it. To me, it's too mythical and too focused on man's search for the transcendent. and everything,
Yeah.
but
Something's greater
I
than
just, yeah,
yourself. Yeah, and something has to be greater. That part I don't like. That it's something is greater than yourself. But the arc of it, frankly, I think the arc of that of Campbell is the model, not just Star Wars, for almost every Harry Potter, almost every fantasy kind of follows that. But that's a different different discussion. But just coming back
yeah,
to a couple of more dramatizations. So the numbers, the Google. Okay, the 10, he does it, he shows how to do 10 to the 10th power is 100. And then at one point, he has this roll of toilet paper with all these zeros, and he walks like around this gigantic space, showing like how big these numbers are. And first, Google used to be the biggest number, 1 or 10 to the 100th power, and then Google Plex was 10 to the 100th to the 100th, and just but visually showing it. And then there's a few scenes when he's in a classroom and he has these kids in Brooklyn. You could have been one of them. Now you were older than those kids back then, but how they dramatize an eclipse. He has a girl stand there with there's light, and she puts over the sun, and the kids are fascinated. They're all raising their hands. They all want to be
right,
part of it, and
right.
and I just love that part in the series as well. But the other thing that you and I talked about earlier is his fascination with the Greeks. So Cosmo, we know, is order in the universe, and planets are wanderers. And he's fixated. He mentions Thales. He gives Thales credit. Democritus and the atomists, who know, knowing the atom is the smallest unit. And he's against Plato and the Pythagoreans. But the mistake he does is he lumps Aristotle in there as well. And he fixates on Aristotle's slavery, that he wasn't against slavery as much as he should have been. But he mentions Aristophanes, who I don't know as well. But I think this is a huge void, for lack of a better term, in the sense of Aristotle's achievement with the scientific method, and how Sagan could have missed that. That was something that perplexed me during
Yeah,
the series. The only references to Aristotle tend to be negative in a 13-part episode series.
yeah, that's a big mistake on Carl Sagan's part, and one that where this brilliant 20th century scientist should know better, because Aristotle's been recognized forever. He's always referred to as that hard-headed Macedonian, in writings about him, that fact-oriented, empirically driven Aristotle is always, he can't be lumped in with Plato. I mean, he's
Yeah.
very good in criticizing Plato, because Plato in the
Yes.
Timaeus tells us that science is at best a likely story. It's like a form of mythology for Plato. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, in the
Mm-hmm.
allegory of the cave, he likens the scientists of his day to shadowologists. They're just studying the flickering shadows on the
Right.
on the wall. Well, big deal. The real truths
Yeah.
are going to be found in a transcendent world. So Plato denigrates science. Plato's wrong on that. And Sagan's right in criticizing. But to lump Aristotle, I mean, that's just a huge error. It's
The
been
first
known.
biologist, right? Aristotle's the first.
Yeah,
How could Sagan not know Aristotle's the first biologist? And you mentioned the
yeah,
Aristotle's
absolutely.
Lagoon, also a great
Yeah,
show that's on PBS. That's another good thing they did, but based on the book that you mentioned.
yeah.
And so
Armand,
that's a
yeah. Let me. Armand Marie Leroy. I don't know. Maybe less than 10 years ago, 2013, something
mhm.
like that. Leroy, got French name, but he's British. He's a biologist at one of the British universities. Published a book that you're referring to, Robert, The Lagoon, subtitled "How Aristotle Invented Science." And
Yeah.
Leroy, Professor Leroy, chronicles Aristotle's research on the Isle of Lesbos, where he's studying
Yes.
life forms,
Yes.
largely marine biology. And you're right. I think Leroy did a TV series on it that I'm sure is available
It's a
on
fabulous
YouTube.
one episode, I think maybe 2 hours long. Highly recommend that because, and it's interesting. Where does he start? He starts by saying that Aristotle thought he was going to take over the academy. When Plato died, and Aristotle was like, "I'm the guy," right? And they give it to Plato's nephew, and Aristotle was like, "I'm out of here. The hell with Athens. I'm going on my own. I'm going to go to this lagoon
Mhm.
and study actual science and biology and botany
Yeah,
too. So anyway,
to Plato, the
just bringing that up.
rationalist. Yeah, to Plato, the rationalist, mathematics was the paradigm subject. You're not dealing with empirical reality, you're dealing with ideas.
Yeah.
To Aristotle, the empiricist, biology was the paradigm science. You get your hands, you're dealing with facts. You're dealing with nature. You're
Hmm.
cutting stuff up, and you're really getting your hands dirty and studying the real world. But we can't criticize Sagan for not knowing, because he died in 1996. We can't criticize him for not being aware of Lavoie's book, which was like 2013. But the
Yes.
broader
Yes.
point is Aristotle's been well known going back to ancient times and ever
Yeah.
since as that hard-headed, fact-oriented Macedonian. And John
Hmm.
Herman Randall, his book, the philosophy
Yes.
professor at Columbia, his book, Professor Randall's book, Aristotle, was published, I think, in the 1960s.
Yep.
Sagan could well have been aware of,
Got it right there. Hmm.
yeah, and Randall again points out, as all Aristotle commentators do, the orientation towards facts. That how did Randall put
Yes.
it? That Aristotle recognized that although facts themselves are not knowledge, don't constitute knowledge, you need a theory to explain the facts. But
Yeah.
facts themselves are far more certain than any theory. There it is.
Yes.
There's Aristotle. Sagan should have known that before he commented on Aristotle on Cosmos. He should have gotten that right. But you're right. He did
Hmm.
not. And we never shied away from criticizing our heroes. He's dead wrong on an important issue there. But the overall body of work from
Yeah.
Professor Sagan is magnificent. It's magnificent.
Yeah. My last thing on the Cosmos, Andy, it's personal and not to you, but my favorite rock band is Rush, and they have this song called Cygnus X1. And I did research on it, and he has a whole segment on this black hole, and he shows how you can go into a black hole, which is kind of what the music dramatizes. And when I saw that, by the series came out after the song did, so I was like, wow, this is exactly what I envisioned, the way he's again dramatizing, showing this abstract concept, but he shows how what would cause something to go into this black hole. So personally,
It's just
that's something else
yeah.
that spoke to me. Hmm.
Just fascinating, right? That all the things and
Yeah.
the stuff and the unexpected and
Yeah.
all the stuff we don't know and the dangers of it.
Yes.
Dangerous enough to be Magellan, and try and
Yeah.
circumnavigate the globe, and of course he got killed in the Philippines. But space travel is probably exponentially more dangerous. But there's
That's
the
right.
heroic spirit that's
Yeah.
to not just explore the solar system, but venture
Yeah.
beyond the solar system, and explore
Hmm.
interstellar space.
Hmm.
I don't know if anybody. I don't know, and I don't know if anybody knows if intergalactic exploration is possible because of the vast distances. I don't know, but
Right.
interplanetary, and I think also interstellar exploration is possible to us. And it's going to take a lot of scientific genius and a lot of
Yeah.
courage to venture out
Right.
into space.
Right.
But
Right.
Sagan
So let's
Sagan
move on
Sagan
to
supports
Contact.
it. Yeah,
Mhm.
Contact. Yeah, go ahead. I never read the book. Did you?
Yeah, I read the book after the film, which he wrote with his wife. And to me, I love the film.
And Androyan, her name is Androyan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't have it on the tip of my tongue, but reason versus faith. That's all I see in that. The scientific inquiry versus squashing, the alternative. And I first I saw the film, like I said, and the book it's similar. There are some differences, but not essential differences. And again, this was his theme for his entire life. I mean, this is where he earned a spot on the Hero Show, because he rational inquiry on one hand, and also rejecting the superstition, and knowing and making the connection that superstition has prevented human progress. So That's I don't have too much more to say about that. Jodie Foster I thought was fabulous. I think that's probably one of the films that put Matthew McConaughey on the map. I don't think I saw him in anything before that movie.
Yeah,
So two superstars
right.
did a good job in the film.
Yeah, it's just interesting to think Carl Sagan, his many talents, his great scientist, wrote a popular science fiction novel. Contact sold I think millions of copies in the first few
Yeah.
years. 1985 it was published. Like I said, I haven't read it, but the
Mm-hmm.
movie I've seen the movie. The movie was very famous. 1997. Unfortunately, the year after
Yes.
he passed away, so he didn't get to see his story and his
Yeah.
characters on the silver screen. But Jodie Foster, big star. I would certainly recommend the film version of Contact
Yeah.
to people. Yeah,
And actually, I
and
have the
Carl
audio
Sagan.
book. I'm sorry, Andy. I have the audio book, and she reads it because the story's told from from a girl's perspective, and Jodie Foster does a great job. I do listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I like when the reader captures, the mood, and so that was my experience there.
Yeah, and I understand. At least I've heard that his uh, Sagan's widow. Again, she's a scientist also, and Androyan. That sounds like Android. And her last name is Droyan, Druyyan. I
Hmm.
understand that she's been in negotiations with one of the major Hollywood production companies to do a film about her husband's life, which a
He
biopic of
deserves one. Yeah.
yeah, a biopic of Carl Sagan would be great.
Yeah.
So we hope
Yeah, I
we
agree.
hope
I
that
would
happens.
say, well, what's the subtitle of the Cosmos series? A Personal Voyage. So it's almost like, would you rather see a biography of Ayn Rand? Yeah, that's very nice, but you give somebody the Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged, and that's really who they are, And in that sense, I
Right.
think even Sagan would like that, but he'd be like, well, this is really my biography, this series, because this is my personal voyage. And so for that, I feel like, yeah, okay, good, good for
That's a
him.
good point. Yeah, that's a good point. I hope the biopic gets done, but yeah, I think we learn. And the analogy is perfect because I know a lot of people who love Ayn Rand. They're very fascinated by her biography, which I understand. It doesn't fascinate me as much personally, just as a personal statement. Because, like you said, I feel like everything I need to know about Ayn Rand's soul, as well as her mind, is in the Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Yeah, and
Hmm.
I think it's similar with Sagan. If he were alive, I wouldn't be surprised if he said just redo, just promote Cosmos, put Cosmos back out there on the silver screen, or put Cosmos back on TV rather than do a
Yeah.
biopic on me, because this is my heart, soul, and mind is in that series. So I think
Yeah, Andy,
that's a good
actually, you
point.
reminded me of one of my favorite. I think towards the end of the book, he talks about libraries and the value of library. The kid's 5 years old and goes to a library, and what he calls libraries nourishment for the soul. That's
Right.
actually, he uses that expression, and I'm like, yeah, that's a great that's a great way to describe something that is, really important to us, and clearly had a big impact in his life.
And you reminded me of something. I can't remember if it was Samuel Johnson or it was Benjamin Franklin, but it was one of those real, bookworm types that I
Mhm.
love because I'm a bookworm. And the quote
Me
is
too.
to the effect that when I yeah, I know we're both a couple of bookworms, but the quote is to the effect that I have some money, I buy books, and if I have anything left over, I buy food. So the nourishment for the soul.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That was my life in my 20s, for sure.
Well, you made the wise decision to avoid going to the university, right? Where you just,
Yeah.
well, it was a little bit less bad back when you were,
Right.
20 years old than it is today. But still, is so much
Yeah.
lack of education in the school system, lack of teaching and education in universities, and a lot of propaganda. So
Yeah. And
you an
Andy,
autodidact.
actually, yeah.
You an
Thank you.
autodidact. So yeah, two thumbs up for you.
Thank you. But I think so. wrap up with Sagan, I think his time in academia was a factor. Being around these people in the humanities that he interacted with, and who have they had those bad ideas back then. They're just worse now, but I think they affected him because he bought into man-made climate change,
Yeah.
global warming. Towards the end of his life, he was against much of what he did was during the Cold War. So he was wanted nuclear disarmament. And today, what are leftist causes? It's not like he was very political. Actually, even in one interview with Ted Turner, Turner asked him about socialism, and he says people should, government should help people become self-reliant. And there's even a contradiction in there.
Yeah.
So not a
Right.
staunch individual rights advocate. I could just say that in terms that we like. And I think that was part of, I think, just being in academia for so much of his life.
Mhm.
I think that is, again, if we look at Atlas Shrugged and Ayn Rand and the physicist and the philosopher and the heroes integrate the two, but one of the arch villains rejects the philosophy side consciously and pays the price. And I think, if Sagan was in it, they might call him, "Are you the guy from Outer Spaces?" You know that scene, Andy, right?
That's right. Well, that's funny. We introduced some levity into the Hero Show, but Carl Sagan was only 23 when Atlas Shrugged was published in 1957. And he might have
Yeah,
read it, and, understood it, and embraced the philosophy. But so we could critique him for this, that, and the other thing. But the overall body of work as a scientist, great scientist, and that's why, like you said, he earned a spot on the Hero Show. And I have,
yeah,
with these caveats and these criticisms, as we have for many heroes. Overall, I have tremendous respect and admiration for Carl Sagan's body of work, and I'm glad
yes, me too.
that he lived and achieved what he achieved. I'm sad that he died at age 62. For his own sake, I would have liked to
Yeah,
see him go on for a long, healthy life, and for our sake, because who knows what else he might have achieved.
more stuff.
Uh, you
Yeah.
know, for
Hmm.
another 20 with another 20 years or more. But I
Hmm.
think I think we could put wrap this up with a nice bow on it and say thank you to
Too.
Professor Carl Sagan for this brilliant body of work, and
Yes.
like you said, especially for this great TV series Cosmos and the book based on it. We say thank you, Carl Sagan. We salute you. And I want to wish you, Robert, and everybody out there in Hero Land, have a heroic day, a heroic weekend upcoming, and let's try to strive to lead a more heroic life.
That's right. You too, Andy.
Thank you.